Hey Tom, how are you today?
Good, Jeff. How are you, buddy?
I'm great. Last time we talked about content marketing, at how B2B sales professionals could actually use it to build market trust and brand awareness.
Yes.
What about the idea of demand gen and really how these folks can use all this content, this great content that their teams are creating and curating? How do they use that to actually drive market need and create that demand in the marketplace?
Well, I think demand generation is the most overlooked and underutilized area of content. If your buyers don't need your solutions, they're not going to buy. Even if they trust you from a brand perspective that you are the thought leader, the leading authority on a certain topic or solution, if they don't need it, if they don't have demand for it, they're not going to buy. It's simple as that. And I think that the key here is to source and curate and share content that really pushes demand for the solution that you are selling. For example, email marketing has been around for years, since the 90s, and everybody would say it's saturated. And yet, if you speak to the owners of leading email marketing agencies, they'll tell you that marketing directors are spending far too little on email marketing. So for me, that's a lack of demand in using email. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Jeff.
Well, it's pretty interesting because you're you're taking this conversation in a direction that's actually away from the touchy-feely world of social media. For so long, what we'd almost call social media tree huggers actually would say, "Oh, you can never sell on social media." It's not like that. It's about engagement and providing value and education and entertainment. And what you're describing is a process where we actually do need to focus on products and solutions and driving the idea that, oh, we're creating awareness. Sure, that's step one. But if they don't know what we do, if they don't have a need for what we do, they're never going to buy.
That's
And
right.
so that's a pretty interesting and almost bold statement in what is still a social media huggy kind of world.
Well, I like the phrase. I start with the end in mind, and the end for me is how do I get my B2B buyer to trust me more than any other professional out there, and to trust me, we use brand building, familiarity, which we discussed in our last chat, and positioning. But again, as you just said, if I don't feel the need, or if I'm not aware of why I need this solution. It's that phrase, I don't know what I don't know.
Mhm.
So if your buyer doesn't know what they need, then all the trust in the world means very little. So my biggest advice to B2B organizations out there and people in sales and business development and customer-facing roles is use content, especially third-party content. That's very powerful because it lacks the perception of greed or self-promotion. Third-party content that really drives home why this solution is required is very powerful for creating that need. And if you can actually create trust at the same time as creating need, you're pretty much 90% there in terms of the deal and the interaction with the decision maker. Again, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, let's say you're sharing this third-party content. Are you are you taking it and putting it in a place you own, like repurposing it on your blog, or are you talking about the kinds of things where you're sharing it on Twitter and the concern? And before I get to the concern, I have always advocated sharing a lot of third-party content so that you're demonstrating you're providing value, education to the community, and all those sorts of things. But one concern, and people have always have asked me this question, if you're sending people to other companies' blogs, to other people's blogs, if they have their own calls to action, are you setting yourself up for the potential of creating demand for someone else's product?
Yeah, and good question. You won't send anyone to a competitor. or to a substitute. You're sending traffic to websites that don't compete with you. For example, Wall Street Journal or Forbes magazine or other third-party sources that are highly reputable, very popular, and can actually prove that the category you're pushing, the solution you're promoting, actually is very popular and required to be used and be invested in.
Right. So
the other thing is you can also invest in hybrid content, which we call at my agency, which is you can also use your own content, like your own interviews or your own white papers, but offer them through third-party websites that are very keen or hungry for content and also possess a very strong brand themselves. So in doing so, you're removing the appearance of self-promotion by driving traffic to your site constantly. And in many cases, maybe half the cases, you are pushing your own content, but through someone else's shell, in which case you could be seen as a thought leader and interested in the welfare of those connected to you.
Right. So what you're saying is it is all about thought leadership type content. So, for instance, whether it's, as you said, reputable publications, or maybe an individual blogger who's not necessarily associated with your company or other companies, but definitely associated with the industry.
That's right.
And then, yeah, I love your other suggestion of taking your content and wrapping it in someone else's brand, which creates some validity and, as you said, presents you as a thought leader with basically with their brand on top of it.
That's right.
So again, I'm always gonna ask this question of you: how do you know when you've created enough demand? How do you know when you've actually produced enough need for your product or service in the marketplace?
As we discussed in our first chat, it's qualitative and it's quantitative. The quantitative nature or proof lies in seeing more articles about it or seeing more people mention it on social networks. You can set up Google alerts and use keywords that are representative of the category or solution that you are selling, and then see on a daily basis how many alerts come to your inbox. So that's a nice quantitative way of mapping out the growth in mentions over time. The other way is to observe how people you're selling to think about and talk about the category. So if you see that over the course of a year, the buyers that you meet are exhibiting clear behaviors that are more in line with the category, they understand how it works, sophistication, education, you know that demand generation has worked.
Right. So just to wrap up, actually tying these online activities to offline behaviors, because again, we're talking about B2B sales professionals, and using content to build these relationships and drive demand is an online activity, and it makes total sense to me that you're using the response in the real world when you're actually calling people, when you're meeting people face to face.
That's right.
To determine how successful you've been.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So thanks very much, Tom. Talk to you next time.
Good talking to you, Jeff, as always. Thank you.